Hey guys, tonight we're squeezing ourselves into the smoky rafters of a medieval inn. No room service, no Wi-Fi, and not even a mattress to speak of. Just a loft above the tap room, packed shoulder to shoulder with strangers, some of whom snore like overworked oxen. As the first pale hints of dawn seep through the slats in the timber walls, you're already regretting your decision to bunk here. It's cold. Not just pull the blanket up cold, but why is my breath visible inside cold? You're wrapped in your only cloak, which doubles as a blanket, a towel, and on bad days, a napkin. Around you, other bodies stir, some groaning, some scratching, a few already shuffling off toward the ladder that leads down into the inn's tap room. A couple are still dead asleep, one with a foot poking into your ribs. It smells, frankly, like a barn someone forgot to muck out. Oh, and those aren't your socks. You didn't come in with socks. Don't ask. You inch toward the ladder, trying not to step on anything too alive. There's a suspicious squeaking sound underfoot, and as your toes hit the floorboards, the chill soaks straight through to your bones. You're navigating this cramped attic by memory because there's no torchlight, only the faint glimmer of morning mist poking through a warped shutter. You blink away the crust of sleep, only to find your feet now dangerously close to a tipped-over chamber pot. Yes? That smell? Not a metaphor. A real chamber pot, half full, perilously close to a tragic misstep. You've survived the night, but the inn hasn't survived your fellow guests. You make it down the ladder, one creaky rung at a time, into a dim, smoky space where a few early risers are already hunched at benches, clutching mugs like lifelines. Behind the counter, the innkeeper's wife is grumbling to no one in particular, elbow deep in some sort of grayish batter. It might be porridge, it might be plaster. Historians still argue whether inn breakfast was meant to be eaten or used to seal drafty windows. She eyes you. You slept upstairs? She says, looking you up and down. You nod. She points a doughy finger. You empty your pot? You blink. She snorts. Didn't think so. You'll do it now. She hands you a sloshing bucket with all the enthusiasm of someone tossing out a dead rat. You grip it carefully, there are no lids here, of course, and shuffle toward the back door, which opens to the inn's latrine. That's a generous term for a wooden bench with a hole in it, perched over a very tragic ditch. As you step out, the frosty morning air hits your face like a slap. The sun's not even properly up, and already your day involves this. You carefully dump the contents and try not to breathe too deeply. A pig snorts at you from the shadows, apparently judging your technique. Back inside, you find a spot near the hearth and sit, slowly, on a rough-hewn bench. You're wedged between a peddler with a suspicious boil on his neck and a woman who might be a merchant's wife or a particularly well-fed thief. The inn's cat slinks past your feet. It's missing part of one ear and clearly runs this establishment. The cook ladles something into a cracked bowl and slides it across the table. It lands with a heavy thud. Inside is a lump of something beige, a crust of bread that could double as a weapon, and a mug of ale that's lukewarm. The bread smells vaguely of pig grease. The ale smells like yesterday's regrets. You eat it all, because this is breakfast, and because the pig is still watching you through the door. You try to eavesdrop. The boil man is whispering to the woman about something called the Black Book in London, a tavern so rowdy it got banned. She laughs and tells him he wouldn't last an hour there. A few men down the bench are arguing about whose oxen pulled a cart through the mire fastest last week. It's not a thrilling conversation, but it beats thinking about the suspicious texture of your bread. At the far end of the room, a boy in an apron is scrubbing tankards with a rag so dirty it might qualify as a health hazard. He yawns so wide you can see his missing teeth. You're just wondering what his dental plan might be when the innkeeper himself stomps in from outside. He's red-nosed, thick-armed, and already yelling about someone stealing firewood. "Ain't nobody burning you in my hearth," he bellows, gesturing to a bundle of logs stacked behind the counter. "That's coffin wood, that is." The inn's rooster suddenly crows, muffled, like it's been sleeping in a pot again. Time has no meaning here. You're just getting started. And remember, this was all before 7 a.m. The second you finish your meal, or at least finish trying to convince your stomach that it was food, the cook snatches your bowl and mutters something about lazy bones not earning seconds. You've barely wiped your fingers on your cloak before you're handed a crude broom made from bundled twigs tied to a stick. Apparently, eating breakfast means you're now part of the cleaning crew. The tap room is mostly cleared out now, save for a few regulars still nursing their ale like it's going to sprout coins at the bottom. You sweep around their feet, trying not to inhale too deeply. The floor is coated with everything from straw to dried mud to something that looks suspiciously like last night's stew. Historians still argue whether medieval inns were cleaned daily or just shuffled the dirt around to redistribute it evenly. As you sweep, you hear a high-pitched squeak, followed by a flash of fur. You freeze. There it is again, scurrying along the base of the wall, right beneath the hams hanging from the ceiling. A rat. No, the rat. You lock eyes for one terrible second before it darts behind a crate. The innkeeper bellows from across the room. "Don't just stand there. Hit it." You swing your twig broom like a knight swings a sword. You miss. The broom head flies off entirely and hits a monk in the back of the head. He doesn't flinch. He's snoring into his tankard. "2 pence off your bill for every rat you kill," the innkeeper shouts. You mutter under your breath that your bill should be free if you survive the diseases alone. By late morning, the inn is slowly filling again. Not with overnight guests, but with locals and passers-by. A group of mule drivers clomps in, stomping off thick layers of muck and hay. They smell like yesterday's sweat and wet wool, which somehow cuts through the persistent tang of ale and wood smoke. One leans on the counter and starts chatting with the barmaid, who rolls her eyes and keeps ladling broth into wooden cups. You take a break near the fire, sitting beside the merchant's wife from earlier. Her name, she tells you, is Joan. She sells ribbons, although you get the feeling she's sold more than that in her time. Joan has opinions. She shares most of them loudly. "See that monk?" she says, nodding toward the man now face down at a corner table. "He's not a monk. Saw him arm wrestling a mason in Salisbury with coins stacked high as your wrist." You ask how she knows. "Because I won," she smirks. You're starting to realize the inn isn't just a place to sleep. It's where news travels faster than fleas, and gossip is its own form of currency. Apparently, the barmaid has a secret husband. The innkeeper once knocked out a bishop, and someone saw a ghost dog in the cellar last week. "Bit like a regular dog," Joan says, "except it breathes fog and smells like brimstone." You're not sure if she means the ghost or the cellar. A loud crash distracts you. Someone's dropped a cask. The innkeeper's son is red in the face, trying to upright a barrel of cider that's now leaking its contents across the dirt floor. One of the mule drivers slips and lands squarely in the puddle. Joan leans in. You didn't hear it from me, but the cider's half vinegar. That's why they serve it warm. It hides the bite. Outside, you hear church bells echoing from across the village. That means it's almost noon, and the innkeeper's wife emerges again with a tray of steaming turnip stew. More mugs are filled, more elbows lean on the counter, and the cat reappears, this time with a limp mouse in its mouth, which it proudly drops beneath the firewood bench. That's our mouser, the innkeeper says, noticing. Earns more than you do. You nod solemnly. It probably does. Then, the door creaks open again, and in walks a young man in a rough wool tunic, dragging a cart behind him with pots clinking inside. Tinker, someone says. You've never seen a crowd go from sleepy to suspicious so quickly. Tinkers, traveling repairmen, aren't trusted in most villages. Something about being always on the move and not owning land puts people on edge. He sets up shop in the corner anyway, pulling out tools and offering to fix broken knives for a coin or two. Joan snorts. Fixed my frying pan so well it won't fry anything but air. You ask her why she keeps coming back. She shrugs. The ale's bad, the food's worse, but the stories? Worth every flea. You help the barmaid carry empty tankards to the back. She's younger than she looks, maybe 16, but she moves with the weariness of someone who's seen too many gropey hands and not enough tips. She points to a wooden shelf. Stack 'em there, and don't drop any, or you're washing them in the trough. Just as you finish, something moves in the corner again. The rat. It's back, and this time it's chewing on what might have once been a cheese rind. You look at the broom handle still in your hand. Round 2 begins. You lunge, weapon in hand. Well, stick in hand, and the rat bolts beneath a bench like it's been through this dance before. The innkeeper laughs from behind the bar. You'll get used to them, he calls. They only bite if you sleep too long. Charming. As the rat disappears once again into the shadows, you retreat in defeat, collapsing onto a bench next to a traveling friar. He smells like onions and rain, and he's muttering to himself in Latin. You nod politely. He blesses your broom handle. The midday lull has settled in. Fires crackle, plates scrape, and the cat grooms itself in the middle of the floor like it owns the building. You're about to doze off when the front door bursts open with the suddenness of a thunderclap. In strides a man in a deep green tunic, mud-caked boots, and a face like someone's been yelling at it for 20 years straight. You don't need anyone to tell you he's a bailiff, one of the Lord's men. The inn stiffens. Conversations halt. A spoon hovers halfway to a mouth. Even the cat vanishes. He walks to the counter, slaps down a small sack of coins, and says something to the innkeeper you can't quite hear. The innkeeper nods once, twice, then pulls out a thick wooden ledger, places it between them, and flips it open with a sigh. Ledger time. You creep a little closer. The book is an organized chaos of tally marks, scribbled names, and vague notations like tinker, 2 nails plus fish, or tom of sheep, drinks on account. Again. It's the innkeeper's lifeline. where debts are remembered, grudges recorded, and more than one guest's fate decided. You notice something curious. Some entries have a small cross next to them. Joan, the ribbon seller, leans over and whispers, "Cross means they died, usually in a ditch or a duel." You inch away from the ledger. The bailiff's voice rises. He's asking about a certain guest, a man who allegedly stayed here last market day, left without paying, and may have been seen stabbing a mason near the bridge. The innkeeper shrugs. "Hard to remember," he says. "Lots of men stay. Some leave quietly. Some don't leave at all." The bailiff squints. "You keep that up, and I'll be back with a writ." The innkeeper nods, calm as pond water, "And I'll keep the fire warm for you." After the bailiff leaves, tension unwinds. Someone exhales loudly. The friar resumes muttering. Joan resumes eating. You get sent outside to haul in firewood, which would be fine if the stack wasn't guarded by a rooster with a vengeance problem. It lunges at you once, twice. You nearly drop the logs, and by the time you return, you're bleeding from the ankle and rethinking your whole attitude toward poultry. Back inside, a nobleman's manservant has arrived ahead of his master, doing the medieval version of checking Yelp reviews. His lordship expects a private table, no drafts, and no contact with the peasantry, he says, sniffing. And he does not eat turnips. Joan scoffs. He'll eat what we have and like it. Preparations begin anyway. The innkeeper orders fresh rushes scattered over the floor, which mask the smell for all of 20 minutes. A fresh candle is placed on a rickety wall sconce. The barmaid scrubs a bench so hard the grain comes off. You're told to wash your hands and then carry a jug of cider that, you strongly suspect, is just the vinegar batch warmed up again. Then the noble arrives. He's about 16 years old, his robes too big and his mustache too small. He doesn't say much, but his manservant makes enough noise for both of them. "My lord will require meat," he announces. The innkeeper nods. "We've got pike. My lord detests fish. Then he'll have bread. My lord is fasting." The innkeeper just walks away. The young lord eventually nibbles a crust of bread and drinks cider like it offends him. Everyone pretends not to notice him wiping his cup with a kerchief. You catch a smirk from the barmaid. Outside, it starts to drizzle. Inside, the fire crackles and smoke curls toward the ceiling, like a ghost looking for a way out. The innkeeper's wife begins humming while she kneads dough for dinner. Her hands are thick and strong and probably capable of flattening a mule. You're asked to take a message to the farrier. Apparently, the noble's horse needs shoeing, and the stable boy is out sick with something described only as the cough. You dart through the rain to the forge, deliver the message, and receive a grim nod in return. Back at the inn, you drip quietly by the hearth, where a trio of elderly men are playing a dice game with an intensity usually reserved for war councils. One of them accuses the other of cheating using a blessed die, which spirals into a long theological argument about whether God cares about dice. You settle in beside them, half drying, half watching. Joan leans over again. "Want to bet who wins?" You shake your head. "I've only got one coin." She grins. "Then you better not lose it." The fire hisses. Rain taps at the windows. The rat peeks out again from under a bench, possibly placing a bet of its own. By now, the tap room has taken on that distinct inn smell. Wood smoke, damp cloaks, boiled onions, and the faint, lingering trace of wet horse. You're still perched near the fire, the hem of your tunic steaming gently from your dash through the rain, when the entire inn goes momentarily still. The noble's voice, thin and unimpressed, drifts across the room. It's cold in here. It's the sort of phrase that isn't a complaint so much as a royal command. The innkeeper's wife grunts and shovels another log into the hearth. The barmaid grabs a nearby curtain and tugs it closed across a cracked window. You're handed another log. Go on then, the innkeeper says. Make yourself useful. You place it on the fire like you're sacrificing it to appease some sulky teenage deity. The noble frowns anyway. Then, chaos. A side door bursts open and in rolls a small cart pushed by two porters. On it is a covered tray the size of a wagon wheel. One pulls off the cloth to reveal a cheese, a monumental, ancient wheel of hard cheese. The noble's manservant announces with great solemnity, "His lordship will contribute this to the inn's board as a gesture of goodwill." There is a beat of silence. Then someone sneezes loudly in the corner. The noble's manservant continues, "This cheese was blessed by the prior of St. Elred's and has aged for 3 years in a sealed stone chamber." Joan leans toward you. You can age a cheese in a sock if you forget it long enough. Someone claps. A handful of peasants hoot. The cheese is carried reverently toward the back and placed under guard, like it might run away if unmonitored. And now the noble expects to be entertained. The innkeeper claps his hands, and out comes a young woman with a battered lute, missing a string and possibly a few musical instincts. She strums anyway. The first song is about a goose that learned to dance. The second is about a sailor with unfortunate boils. The noble frowns deeper. You're told to fetch more rushes and strew them on the floor around his bench. Fresh straw and dried herbs meant to absorb mud and odor. You do your best, though the smell of wet socks still reigns supreme. Meanwhile, the noble's dog, a small, vicious thing with the jaw of a bear trap and the personality of a wet boot, starts barking at the cat. The cat stares, flicks its tail, and vanishes upward into the beams, clearly uninterested in drama. Then, a problem. A tinker from earlier returns from the stable, bleeding from one hand. "Horse bit me," he shouts, waving his fingers. "That's not my horse," the noble snaps. "It bit me all the same." The noble's manservant stiffens. "You dare raise your voice at his lordship?" The tinker grits his teeth. "I'll raise more than that if it happens again." And just like that, you're in the middle of what passes for a noble dispute in a medieval inn. Voices rise, accusations fly. The innkeeper bangs a ladle on the counter. "Settle down or settle it in the yard," he bellows. You glance outside. It's still raining. No one wants a yard duel in the mud. Eventually, tempers cool, mostly because the noble's manservant declares the tinker beneath his lordship's notice and offers him a single coin. The tinker spits in it, pockets it, and limps to a table, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like a hex. The barmaid sighs. And we were having such a normal day. You end up back behind the counter, wiping mugs and trying to look invisible. The noble finally leaves, sweeping out into the rain with his manservant, his barking dog, and his still unopened wheel of cheese. As the door closes behind them, The entire room seems to breathe out at once. Joan raises her mug to peace and quiet, and small nobles with big egos. A few others toast with her, including the tinker, who has now bandaged his hand with what appears to be someone's sock. You're dispatched to the common room upstairs, where the beds are being prepared. Beds is generous. They're pallets of straw and wool, some of them stuffed with hay, others with something that might once have been feathers. You fluff them up, or at least try to make them resemble something a human might sleep on without weeping. The innkeeper's daughter, a pale, sharp-eyed girl of 10, tells you to check for beetles. They crawl up in the straw and lay eggs, she says cheerfully. You do as she says, swatting at something that hops. It might have been a cricket, might have been a beetle. You're trying not to think too hard. One pallet smells strongly of garlic, another of old shoes. You shake out the worst offenders, then head back down. In the corner, a scribe has appeared, scribbling away with a goose quill on a wax tablet. He's sketching floor plans, mumbling about tavern geometry. Historians still argue whether medieval inns had standard layouts, or if each one just evolved into a lopsided maze of stairs and secret doors. This one definitely feels like the latter. As evening creeps closer, you realize you've now cleaned, served, watched a minor class conflict, and learned more about medieval cheese than you ever planned to. And dinner hasn't even started. You stretch, your back cracks. Somewhere upstairs, someone coughs, and the cat is still watching you. The air in the tap room is growing thicker by the hour. Smoke curls from the hearth, mingling with the dampness of cloaks drying over benches and the general human musk of 50 people packed into a single wooden box. The inn is at capacity, maybe even over. You can't tell if your stomach is rumbling or if it's someone else's. It's just a steady undercurrent of digestion, anticipation, and quiet despair. The innkeeper motions you over and shoves a stack of tankards into your arms. Take these to the men at the west wall, he says, and mind your fingers. They bite. You maneuver through the press, dodging elbows and spilled ale. The men at the west wall turn out to be a group of bricklayers on their third round of drinks and fourth round of arguing about whose brother-in-law has the best thatch roof in Kent. You slide the tankards onto the table just as one of them roars with laughter and slaps the other on the back so hard he nearly face plants into his stew. I didn't order this, one says, inspecting his mug with theatrical suspicion. You gesture to the innkeeper, who waves vaguely as if to say, don't engage, just nod. So you nod. The bricklayer takes a sip and shrugs. Fair enough. On your way back to the bar, you pass the ledger again. It's still open, ink drying on a fresh entry. You glance down and see a name you don't recognize next to a note. Owes 3 nights, 1 chicken, and a curtain. You don't ask. You don't want to know. Then comes the hush. A tax collector enters. No one claps. No one smiles. This isn't that kind of guest. He's tall, pale, and dry as old parchment. His cloak is spotless, his boots gleam unnaturally, and his fingers tap on the hilt of a dagger, not in menace, but in boredom. The innkeeper meets him with a slight bow. You can feel the temperature drop despite the roaring fire. Evening, Sir Hugh, the innkeeper says. Sir Hugh's eyes sweep the room like a vulture scanning for weak limbs. I'll need your accounts, he says, and your licensure parchment. The innkeeper, to his credit, does not roll his eyes. He produces the same ledger from earlier and hands it over. Sir Hugh flips through it with long, slow fingers. "You're still brewing your own ale," he says. "We are." "You've paid the king's ale duty this quarter?" "We have." Sir Hugh makes a non-committal noise, something between a cough and a threat. He turns another page. You edge closer as casually as you can. Joan sidles up behind you and whispers, "Watch this." He's about to ask for a bribe, and right on cue, Sir Hugh pauses, taps a line in the ledger with one manicured fingernail, and says, "This entry, it's missing a detail. Who vouched for this man?" The innkeeper frowns. He came with a merchant caravan, had a seal. Sir Hugh raises an eyebrow. A seal can be forged. A witness is preferred. There's a long pause. The innkeeper leans across the bar, lifts a pouch from under the counter, and lays it, softly, silently, onto the open page. Sir Hugh doesn't blink. He closes the book, tucks the pouch away with the same indifference one might use to pocket a loose button, and smiles thinly. "Very good," he says. "Carry on." He turns and walks out without another word. Joan exhales. That man could sour milk just by looking at it. You return behind the counter, where the innkeeper is already uncorking a fresh cask. He mutters, "Cheaper to pay him than to fight him, or poison him," the barmaid adds too brightly. The innkeeper snorts. "We'd waste good stew." Dinner prep begins in earnest. A bubbling pot is set over the hearth, and you're assigned the prestigious job of turning the spit. It's not a goose or a leg of lamb or anything regal. It's a rabbit, possibly two, if you count the tail. Your job is to rotate it slowly so it doesn't char on one side and stay raw on the other. A mindless task, a warm one. You begin to feel your toes again. The minstrel returns, this time with a rebec, a sort of medieval violin, and a smirk that suggests he's already composed 3 ballads about terrible meals he's had in worse inns. He strikes up a tune, one that sounds suspiciously like it was stolen from the rhythm of someone falling downstairs. His voice is nasal, but enthusiastic. "Oh, the inn at the edge of the bog serves stew that could strangle a hog." You can't tell if the innkeeper is amused or plotting his slow demise. The crowd is eating it up, figuratively and literally. Stew bowls are passed hand to hand, wooden spoons clatter, and laughter bounces off the beams overhead. A child screams with joy as he finds a whole carrot in his bowl. His mother looks at it like it's a miracle. You deliver more mugs, more bowls, more bread that might once have been a brick in another life. It's loud, it's smoky, it's alive in a way that only a medieval inn could be, a blend of barely controlled chaos, fermented beverages, and the clink of coins that disappear faster than they're earned. And then the door creaks open once more. A man walks in alone, face shadowed by a hood. No luggage, no mud on his boots. He slides a silver coin across the counter without saying a word. The innkeeper eyes him, nods, and says, "Private room?" The man nods once. You watch the transaction. Joan nudges you again. Spies always pay in silver, or assassins. You swallow. You think or maybe he just doesn't like turnips, which honestly is fair. By now, the stew pot has been scraped to its last scorched turnip, and the crusts of bread are being fought over like prized relics. Someone starts singing in the back, very badly, and a group of masons hurl stale crusts at him in retaliation. One hits the cat. The cat does not forgive. You're rinsing out mugs behind the counter when the door opens yet again, this time to a burst of laughter and muddy boots. A handful of locals stumble in from the drizzle outside, drenched and boisterous, led by a man in a fur-trimmed cloak who proclaims loudly, "We heard there was music, and we brought our own ale just in case." They're not nobles. They're yeomen, landowning freemen with money to spend and the confidence of people who aren't beholden to a lord. That makes them unpredictable. The minstrel, never one to miss an opportunity, strikes up a jig, faster and louder than before. People start clapping. One of the yeomen pulls the barmaid into a spin, and though she protests at first, she's grinning by the third twirl. Someone bangs their mug rhythmically on the table. A stool topples. Another is dragged into the makeshift dancing ring. You're roped into helping clear space by a one-eyed tanner who insists on showing off his footwork. "Used to dance for the sheriff," he says proudly, "before I drank his cider and stole his daughter." That seems like the sort of detail best left unconfirmed. The music swells, fast and twangy. The fire roars. A drunken cooper climbs on a bench and tries to whistle through a reed he found in his soup. A piglet, yes, a piglet, no one knows where it came from, skitters across the floor and vanishes under a bench with surprising grace. You dodge a spinning woman and catch a cup mid-topple, only for a second one to crash behind you. The innkeeper doesn't flinch. He just grunts. 2 coppers? And continues ladling out cider like a man watering plants in a thunderstorm. Suddenly, a loud crack. A stool leg gives out, and its occupant collapses in a pile of tunics and laughter. People cheer. Another round is ordered. You retreat to the relative safety of the hearth, where an older man with weathered hands and a nose like a ridgeback hound is telling a story to 3 wide-eyed boys. He's leaning close, voice low. "It was a Tuesday, just like this," he says, wind blowing, fire crackling, stew as bland as mud. And that's when she appeared. The boys lean closer. A woman in white, pale as candle wax, hair down to her knees, barefoot, walked straight across the river, didn't touch the stones. You raise an eyebrow. "Left no footprints," he says. "Not a one. Just fog, thick as wool." Then she said, "Give me your name." And when my brother did, he forgot who he was. Took him 3 weeks to remember his cow's name. Joan appears beside you with a fresh mug and smirks. She tells that story twice a week. Sometimes it's her brother, sometimes it's her mule. The boys gasp. One whispers, "Do you think she'll come tonight?" Joan leans down. "Not if you eat your peas." You slip away toward the bathroom. Less a room, more a shed with a steaming wooden tub in the corner and a puddle of questionable fluid on the floorboards. A man is just stepping out, dripping and shivering, clutching his clothes like treasure. You've somehow been assigned to assist the next guest. It's the tinker, who limps in still holding his bandaged hand and eyeing the tub like it might bite. "Hope it's hot," he mutters. You gesture to the steam rising from the water, which is mildly encouraging. He undresses behind a sheet. Modesty matters, even when hygiene doesn't, and lowers himself in with a sigh that sounds like dying cows. Ought to charge extra for warm water, he says, scrubbing his neck with a lump of lye soap the consistency of cheese. You hand him a towel that smells of mildew and moss. That's the cleanest one, the barmaid had said. You believe her. Barely. You hear more voices in the hallway. Someone's trying to get into the bath next, arguing that their boil needs soaking. You quietly leave. Back in the tap room, the mood is wobbling between euphoric and unruly. One of the yeomen is dancing on a table. The minstrel has either passed out or fallen in love with his Rebecca. It's hard to tell from the angle. The piglet reemerges with what looks like a napkin in its mouth. The cat is watching it with murder in its eyes. And then a fight breaks out. It starts small. Someone says something rude about someone else's mother's soup, and ends with a stool flying across the room and hitting the ledger shelf. Mugs clatter. Someone screams, and 3 people rush in to pull them apart. You duck behind the counter just in time to avoid a flung boot. The innkeeper slams his ladle down again. Outside, or pay double. Miraculously, it works. The fighters stagger toward the door, still shouting but no longer throwing punches. The innkeeper turns back to the barmaid and mutters, "Add it to the page." She scribbles something into the ledger with ink-stained fingers. You peek. It just says, "Punch tax, 2 each." The door closes. The noise settles. The fire crackles again, the tension melting like candle wax. Someone starts humming. The tinker returns, damp but glowing, and declares the bath almost tolerable. He raises a mug and toast to clean water and bad cider. You clink your cup to his, and for one strange, smoke-stained moment, everything feels oddly cozy. Until the piglet knocks over the ink bottle. The piglet, brilliant agent of chaos that it is, topples the ink bottle with the kind of casual grace you'd expect from a cat knocking a goblet off a windowsill. It doesn't squeal, just trots off into the shadows, trailing a blotchy line of ink behind it like some nightmarish medieval quill. You scramble to save the ledger. The barmaid lunges with a towel, and the innkeeper mutters something dark and indecipherable, possibly a curse, possibly a bread recipe. The page is smeared. One poor soul's debts are now merged with someone else's bar tab and an order for pickled eel. No one's going to believe that wasn't intentional, Joan says, appearing over your shoulder like a helpful ghost. You just deleted half of Tom the baker's debts. You try to protest, but she just pats your arm. You're a hero to the working man. Cleanup begins again. You're given a bucket and a rag and told to follow the trail of piglet chaos through the back corridor, which, joy of joys, leads you to the inn's sleeping loft. You haven't seen it since the morning, when it was just creaky boards and strangers' feet. Now, with candles guttering low and shadows thickening in every beam, it has taken on the full haunted house aesthetic. Every creak sounds like a curse. Every blanket smells like someone else's year. You pass 2 old women already bedding down, wrapped in shawls and whispering about the man with no name who paid in silver. Assassin, clearly, one says. Spy, says the other. Haunted, says a third voice from the darkness. You don't linger. Back downstairs, the fire's burning lower now, reduced to a gentle glow and the occasional spit of sap. Supper is being cleared, what's left of it. Mostly bones, half-dipped crusts, and a deeply suspicious porridge loaf. The air is thick with the heavy warmth of full bellies and spilt drink. A large, snoring man has taken over an entire bench, arms flung wide like he's claiming territory. A monk, different from the earlier snoring one, sits quietly at a side table, eyes closed, possibly meditating, possibly sleeping with dignity. You ease onto a nearby bench and finally take a moment to relax. Your legs ache. Your back is one complaint away from mutiny. Your hands smell faintly of garlic and something you hope is ale. Across the fire, a merchant clears his throat and begins telling a ghost story. He doesn't announce it, doesn't gather a crowd, just begins, like the story's been waiting to be told. There was a boy, he says, born behind a tavern, raised among drinkers and fighters and men who never knew silence. One night, he heard his name whispered, not from any mouth, but from the rafters. Someone laughs nervously. Thought it was a trick. The merchant continues, ignored it, until it came again, and again, every night, just after the candles died. The taproom has gone still. Even the piglet, curled up in a basket now like it belongs here, seems to be listening. The voice said it was hungry, always hungry, said it lived in the beams and it fed on forgotten debts. There's a long pause. Boy grew up, he says, left the tavern, became rich, powerful. But no matter how far he went, every time he closed his eyes, he heard it. Pay what you owe. A log collapses in the fire with a hiss. Joan, beside you, whispers, 10-1, he's just trying to scare Tom the baker. Tom the baker, it turns out, has indeed gone pale. As the story fades, so does the room's energy. The drunken laughter has given way to sleepy murmurs. Someone is softly playing a pipe in the corner, more breath than tune. The inn is shifting, transforming from chaos to cocoon, a place to survive the night. The bath shed is dark now, water drained. A faint scent of soap still lingers in the air, trying its best to mask the usual human bouquet of wet wool and smoke. You spy someone carrying in new buckets, perhaps refilling it for the next lucky guest. You overhear someone grumbling about the shared bed situation. Ah yes, because if you're not wealthy enough for a private room, you're bedding down next to strangers, often several of them, top to tail. The innkeeper's daughter explains cheerfully, so no one kicks faces. You help spread out rush mats upstairs, making sure the worst of the straw is cleared. You fluff one pillow. It squawks. You decide not to investigate. Back downstairs, the fire is down to embers. The innkeeper is carefully setting out an iron trivet over the coals, placing a small pot of some midnight concoction on it. Herbs and cider, maybe. A snore cuts through the silence, deep and resonant. Probably the same monk from this morning, recharging for his next performance. The innkeeper's wife stretches and says to no one in particular, heard the king's coming through the region in a fortnight. Best lay in more cheese. You want to laugh? You really do. But your eyes are drooping. Even the cat is yawning. A final clatter comes from the back corridor. A figure stumbles out, covered in ink blots, hair standing on end. The piglet, he mutters, knows things. Nobody responds. This is just normal now. You're not quite sure when you became part of the inn's furniture, but at this point, you creak when you move. You smell like wood smoke and soup, and you've accepted that your bed will contain at least one live thing that isn't you. The atmosphere has thickened to that heavy, sleepy stillness that only follows full bellies, spent arguments, and the slow burn of cheap ale. You help close the shutters. The barmaid thanks you with a nod, too tired to speak. The wind outside has picked up, whistling through the gaps in the timbers. Inside, it's still warm, still flickering with firelight, still humming with that last pulse of energy before it all drifts into snores. Upstairs is calling. You creep up the ladder, careful not to step on the dog curled on the bottom rung. The loft is full now, bodies wrapped in cloaks, pressed shoulder to shoulder like sardines with bad dreams. Some sleep already, some whisper. One sings softly to themselves in what might be Breton or just a very creative version of snoring. Your spot is there, by the eaves, right where the wind rattles the shingles. You settle in. The straw pokes through the cloak. Something rustles beneath your hip. You ignore it. From below, a loud, wet snore erupts, then another, then a third. It's a full choral arrangement now, one monk, one cooper, and one anonymous contributor vibrating the floorboards. Across the room, someone coughs into their sleeve and mutters, "Shut it, Thomas," to no one in particular. A fart answers. It's impossible to know who. This is sleeping in a medieval inn. All the privacy of a public bath, all the comfort of a haystack, and the soothing ambiance of a livestock barn. You roll over. Your knee hits something furry, possibly a boot, possibly not. Below, the barmaid has blown out the last candle. Darkness spreads like ink soaking through linen. The fire downstairs sighs one last hiss of breath. Even the piglet is asleep now, cradled by a shoemaker from York who's using it as a pillow. You stare at the rafters and notice, yes, there it is, a small figure carved into the beam. A crude little face with big eyes and a smirk, probably whittled there by some long-gone drunk with a dull knife and too much time. It's oddly comforting. You wonder how many people have stared up at it and wondered the same thing. How did I end up here? A voice whispers beside you. You think that's the same straw as last year? You glance sideways. It's Joan. Of course it is. She's wrapped herself in 2 cloaks and a curtain, eyes barely visible, like some medieval burrito with an attitude. "Same straw," she says. "I can tell by the itch." A pause. "Remember the cheese?" "Of course you do. How could you forget the sacred cheese of Lord What's-his face, still uncut, possibly glowing faintly behind the bar?" "What do you think happens to it?" she whispers. "Think it hatches? Into what?" "A bishop." You snort. It echoes. Someone mumbles a prayer in response. The loft settles again. Someone tosses. Someone scratches. Someone is definitely whispering to themselves in the dark, probably composing poetry, probably bad. Your eyes flutter. The rhythm of the inn is hypnotic now. Wood creaking in the beams, snores rattling like old wheels, the occasional drip from a leaky roof tile. And then, a scream. Not loud, not panicked, just a startled yelp from the hallway. A figure stumbles into the loft. It's the man with the silver coin. He's white-faced. He points downward. There's something in the latrine. Everyone groans. No one moves. Something watching. The monk grumbles, then shut the lid. You do not investigate. Instead, you burrow deeper into the hay, close your eyes and decide that if there is a ghost in the latrine, it can wait its turn like everyone else. Downstairs, a log falls in the hearth with a final puff of smoke. Joan yawns. If I die tonight, tell them I want to be buried in this curtain. You nod. Sleep is coming now. Not clean, peaceful sleep, but medieval inn sleep, full of jabs from straw, mysterious breathing sounds, and the creeping dread that you're going to dream about singing cheese. Still, it's sleep. Until someone kicks you in the shins. Again. You awaken, or rather, you drift from half sleep into quarter sleep, sometime in the middle of the night, unsure whether the snoring has grown louder, or you've simply adjusted to the ambient chaos of humanity and Piglet. You lie there, blinking into the dark, wondering what time it is. But there are no clocks in here, just the sounds. The occasional gust of wind rattling the shutters, the quiet wheeze of the monk's nose harp solo, and the rustle of someone adjusting in their cloak nest and triggering a minor avalanche of straw. Then the loft groans. Not just metaphorically, actually groans. You hear it under your back, the timbers shifting with a long, aching complaint. It sounds disturbingly like a cow attempting Latin. A few people shift in response, mumble, scratch, and then return to snoring like nothing happened. You'd almost drift off again, but a sharp, wet-sounding thwop jolts you upright. You sit up, squinting. It's just a bucket. Someone knocked over the slop bucket. Joan, in her curtain cocoon, mutters without opening her eyes. We all die eventually. You crawl away from the spill radius. Back in your itchy hollow of straw, you try once more to close your eyes. But there's no such thing as deep REM in a shared loft with 20 strangers and exactly 0 personal boundaries. The man to your left is sleep talking. Something about a goat. The woman to your right has a foot firmly planted against your thigh. You're not sure if she knows. You don't want to know. Then the smell hits. It's subtle at first, faint even, but quickly becomes unmistakable. A fart of noble proportions, possibly the monk, possibly the piglet, possibly a collaboration. There is no escape. A few groans of protest ripple through the hay. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else just says, "Why?" Into the dark. It passes. Time trudges on. You get up once to use the latrine, navigating the ladder by candlelight and sheer guesswork. The hallway is cold. The floorboards cold. The door to the latrine, very slightly ajar. You push it open. There's nothing inside except a heavy smell of vinegar and damp wood. And the ghost the man claimed was watching? Nowhere to be seen. Or maybe it's hiding. Or maybe, like you, it's too tired to care anymore. You return to the loft to find someone's taken your spot. It's Joan. She doesn't move. She mumbles, "My curtain, now." You roll your eyes and find a new spot by the eaves where the wind whistles straight through the wall and directly into your soul. You lie back, shiver, and try again. In the hours before dawn, the room becomes eerily quiet. A few coughs, a few wheezes, the constant background hum of everyone breathing. That's the sound you don't expect to be so loud. Breathing. People inhale like they're making soup out of air. And still, you begin to drift. You're almost there, teetering on the edge of unconsciousness when... Rooster. Not just any rooster. The innkeeper's rooster. with a voice like a dying trumpet and the timing of a sadistic bell ringer. It crows once, then again, and then, because it's a performer, 3 more times, just for good measure. The loft groans. A few people curse. One man sits bolt upright and slams his head into a rafter. The day has begun. You roll onto your side, squeezing your eyes shut. Just 5 more minutes. Just 5. But already, downstairs, you hear footsteps. The innkeeper's wife is stirring the morning batter. The cat meows impatiently. Someone drops a tankard. Someone else is shouting about oats. The piglet lets out a single satisfied grunt. And you? You lie there, tangled in straw and regrets, knowing you'll do it all again tonight. Because for all its discomfort, its smells, its rats, its ghosts, and its questionable culinary decisions, there's something oddly magical about this messy, noisy, smelly little haven. It's home, for now. And as the dawn creeps in through the cracks, the snores fade, the pots clatter, and the guests rise one by one, you take one deep breath and let go. Let the inn drift away now. Let the sounds soften, the clink of mugs becoming distant, the stomping boots just a fading echo in your ears, the snoring monks, the creaky ladders, the sleepy laughter curling around the beams, all of it growing quieter, like the hush that follows a story well told. Picture the fire, burned low to warm orange embers. It flickers just enough to light a cat's tail as it slips behind the counter. The last of the stew pots has been washed, the last rat chased from the pantry, the last joke whispered across the loft. It's just you now, wrapped in an old cloak, tucked into straw that doesn't itch quite as badly as you remember. Your eyes are heavy, your limbs sinking into the soft, dark weight of sleep. Let the sounds dissolve. The room fades. The flickers of candlelight go dim. Even Joan and her curtain are still at last. The night holds steady. The wind is no longer cold, just gentle, tapping lightly at the shutters like an old friend saying goodnight. Somewhere out there, maybe a rooster dreams of sleeping in. Maybe even the piglet is dreaming, hooves twitching in its basket. And you? You're already far away, deeper into the hush, where the stories can't wake you anymore. Just the slow, steady rhythm of breath and the comfort of straw that no longer pokes. Stay there now. No need to get up. Not yet. There'll be time enough for rushes and tankards and noble cheese wheels tomorrow. For now, just sleep.